The research and development feature in MarkStrat, I will go ahead and warn you up front, is probably the most challenging aspect for students and teammates to wrap their head around. So I'm going to go through this and hopefully it will become clear. Okay, so before I click on the R&D button here, the pink button, just want to preface this by saying that as in the real world, when manufacturers of things like electronic products, when they want to develop a new version of a brand, or even just develop a brand from scratch, they have to engage their R&D department. The R&D department then uses their product building expertise, and they build a prototype. They build a working prototype that then is sent out to individuals within the firm and outside the firm to test, pre-test. You've probably heard of alpha tests and beta tests and things like that. Well, that's what we're talking about here. So in the simulation, what's hardest for people to wrap their heads around is any sort of new brand or modified brand has to come through an R&D project. Even if you only want to change one small little minute detail, there still has to be a brand new working prototype built. Okay, so the way it works temporally is you build, you order the R&D project in period, say 0. In period 1, you can then use the completed R&D project to create a branded product that you can then sell in the marketplace. Okay, so remember that it's always, always, always everything starts with a prototype. Okay. All right. Couple other things before I get into this is that with R&D, the actual R&D activity, the actual process of developing the prototype costs money. Okay, it's usually a couple $1,000,000. Just really depends on how you configure the product. So you've got that cost that will be considered, that will come out of your marketing budget. But also within the R&D function, you can also get an estimate of what each brand unit will cost once it is actually in the marketplace being mass produced, and so on and so on. Okay, so keep all that in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the R&D function. So we click on the pink button. Okay, so here you do basically one of two things. If you want to start a new Sonites project, you click the arrow on the left. If you want to create a new Vodites project, you click the arrow on the right. All right, so let's start with Sonites. Okay, so in R&D, like I mentioned, you are ordering a prototype. In the simulation, it's called a project. So you're ordering a project. Okay, so if you're ordering a Sonite, projects have to start with the letter P and the letter O. Okay. And then after that, you can create whatever letters you want. Typically, if you have an idea what the brand name of the saleable product is later on already, then you can go ahead and just call it that. So say we want to develop a brand named Sol. So we're going to name our prototype PO Sol. Okay? And then here this is the place where you just put the objective. The objective is to, and this is just for your own edification. This is just a note section. So we're going to say create a new brand, Sol, to target explorers, for example. Okay? Then you click next. Okay? Now on this screen, it asks you for the specific attribute levels of all the attributes. Okay? So you have to specify number of features, design index, battery life, display size, and processing power. Okay, so you should be wondering now, where do I get those numbers? Well, those numbers depend on primarily on your goals. And if your goal is to create products that appeal to a certain target segment, you need to find out what those values are. So you typically will use the semantic scale report and the multidimensional scaling report, and probably also the market report to come up with these numbers. Okay, so once you've done that, let's assume you feel like you need to build a prototype with 12 features, design index of 7, battery life of 48 hours, display size of 36 inches, and processing power of 80. Let's type there 80. Okay, so you enter those numbers in, and before you click next, you have to specify your desired base cost. Okay, so you can do two things here. If you keep the top radio button selected, what it will do is the simulation will just build it as is. You're not worried about cost. You're just saying, okay, just build it at the lowest possible cost, but I'm not going to specify for you what that cost is. Okay. The other option is if you're trying to save money, you can specify a base cost for this project. Okay. So typically, I suggest, or I strongly recommend people to always click develop this project at the lowest possible base cost. And the reason is this: if you have a specific dollar figure in mind that you can spend, and it's not enough, the project isn't going to come out. There's not going to be a positive outcome. It's going to end up with, they may have to cut corners, do things more cheaply, and that could cause problems. So I always suggest to have keep the top option selected. Okay. Once you have made those decisions about attribute characteristics and desired base cost, then you click next. Okay. Now, once you click next, at the top of the screen, you see the basically summary of what you've entered so far, your attribute levels, your base cost method. Okay. On this screen, you've got to figure out, or this screen actually is used to determine how much the unit product cost will be once this product is on the marketplace. Okay, so this is important to know because your unit cost is going to impact cost of goods sold. It's going to impact your brand contribution, and if you have kind of a price in mind already to sell the product for, you want to know kind of what are your margins going to be. Okay, so what you do here is quite simply is you click this run button. This is an online query that estimates cost for not only your project itself, but also the unit costs. And so you're able to do up to 5 per period. Okay, so make sure you use them wisely. So if we click run here, it gives you two numbers here. First of all, the estimated minimum base cost per unit once the product is in production will be $189. So if you're thinking of selling a product at the $250 range, you're going to have problems here because there's not much margin there. If you're thinking $500 range and you see $189 as your cost, that's pretty good because after discounts and margins and things, you're probably going to be left with a pretty significant contribution. Okay, so there's that, and then also below it tells you how much the actual R&D project itself is going to cost. So it's $1.38 million, and as you can see here, this company has got plenty of money left over, so that's not a problem. Okay, now it's important to know that in order for the R&D project to complete in the next period, it has to be fully funded. Okay, so if you don't have enough money, it will partially complete, and then will then complete later on when you're able to allocate more money to it. But typically, it's a good idea, especially if you're in a simulation series where you're not doing a ton of rounds. It's important to get the R&D project done as soon as possible. Okay, so I always recommend strongly that you click allocate the budget specified below and make sure that the number that's entered there equals the same number that's there. Okay, that ensures, assuming you have the budget, that the thing will fully complete. But again, if you don't have enough money and you want to kind of partially fund it this period and partially fund it next period, you can do that, but it will delay the completion of the project an additional period. Okay. The other option here is to initiate a feasibility study. This will cost money and time and cause some significant delays. So I would say never, ever, ever choose that option. Okay. Then we click next if we're all good and happy. And now on this screen, what we have is we have a summary of everything that we've entered in. Okay. And if we're good with that, you just click home and it will go in as part of your decisions. But if you get to this point and you change your mind, you can delete it and undo it, and you'll see that this money, the 1380, will go back into the budget. So I'm going to do that right now. Click delete. Okay, so in a nutshell, that's what R&D is. Again, it's very tricky for people to wrap their heads around, but again, just remember that any sort of brand creation or brand modification has to go through a prototype. Every brand in the marketplace has to be based on some sort of prototype or project.